Arizona, and Florida, and these different states. And it's because the people in these states either know and are silent, or their children go to schools that are well run and they aren't beating children, and so they may not even know this is going on. But it's like a secret, and the state has made it very clear, if you're not from this state, we do not have to listen to you. And so the average person who the people who have children who go to schools where their children are being beaten, most of them are very much afraid to speak out about this because they've been through it. They're still going through their own trauma, and they are shut down. So this is a huge problem. We could have all of our children safe, but we don't have the voices. And the thing is that if there were enough people, no matter which states you were in, to speak out against it, they would have to respond. And the people in these states where who are afraid to speak out would feel like, okay, people know this is going on here. We're starting to receive support, and they wouldn't be as afraid to speak out. But we aren't doing that. And so this is the year 2020, and we have people, the majority, of course, are black, boys in particular, who are being beaten, and just like their great-great-great-grandpa was on a U.S. slave plantation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, have you met my goddaughter, Cheyenne McQueen?
I don't think I have.
She's been a guest on the podcast, and she's does public speaking on behalf of transitioning foster kids that are exiting the foster care system. And she often will go to local legislators there, and I'd be more than happy to introduce the two of you because she's a great public speaker.
That would be just tremendous. I mean, honestly, one day I'm actually writing a book. It's called God Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And when I write about how many times I've spoken out or where or, different campaigns I've had, I think that she would be very interested to see that do not plan on going anywhere until this problem is solved, and that there is the federal bill has been passed. Mm-hmm. I've gone state to state, but we have a bill to ban this everywhere. And I'm going to share with you the different types of specific crimes that go on as a result of corporal punishment. Like I said, if they get rid of the wooden board, they have to get rid of all the other things that they're doing. For example, in Georgia, students are tased often. In the state of Minnesota, that's a place where electric shock is used on students. Let's see which other states. Mississippi, there's just a lot of yanking, there's a lot of beating, there's a lot of throwing kids up against the wall. These are the kinds of reports I get from people who live in these states who are in touch with me. Arkansas is out of control with just I don't even want to talk about the kinds of stories I hear with relationships between staff and students that's going on. And then there become the threats that follow. The problem is that teachers, and like I said, I've been teaching a long time, teachers very often know that they are above the law as far as abusing kids, because as long as we have that wooden board and a teacher sexually molests a child, smacks a child, it's not as bad as the wooden board, because the wooden board is deemed a deadly weapon. So if we are not handling something as extreme as a deadly weapon, why are we going to handle molestation and that sort of thing? And there was one girl when I was campaigning in the state of Tennessee. It was even in the newspaper. A girl was sexually molested during lunch, removed from campus for that purpose. It was reported. They did nothing about it. They did nothing about this. It was even in the newspaper, just like as if it was an advertisement.
That's my concern. Is that's my concern is that they're objectifying the children in the media, younger and younger, and then these children are, a lot of them come from abusive situations, and then they're put in the foster care system where they're then again objectified again and often experience sexual abuse. And so it's all seems to be swept under the rug, and we're sort of creating this like secretive culture of trafficking the children, because 85% of children now that are coming out of 85% of child trafficking children come out of the child protective foster care system. And so they don't, they're not really, they're not speaking out against this, and and they're not they seem to be condoning it in the media.
They are. And I had been speaking out about this the other day about foster care. It's so sad. There are so many lies about how in foster care they rescued these children from an abusive home. Many of these children are coming from homes that are just fine. Not all of them, of course, but a large majority of them come from homes that are just fine. And as I had mentioned to a friend fairly recently, when I was teaching at a college in California, I had gone to a speak out there, and a representative of Child Protective Services was there, and he was just talking about how great Child Protective Services are, how well taken care of the kids are. And I was sitting there looking at this guy saying, who are you that you're going to come in here and tell these blatant lies? When you're in Child Protective Services, there is about 1% of the families, or I should say children, placed in CPS care that are protected at home, let alone at school. In the state of Texas, a foster child who had been abused at home was placed in foster care, went to school. The teacher, he kept getting out of his seat because he was hungry. The teacher literally put him in a basket hole, murdered him in front of his classmates, and was able to continue teaching. That's how out of control this form of abuse is. They do not want teachers to be arrested because it sets the precedence for, okay, well, if she's arrested, what about all of these? Mm-hmm. So rather than arrest any, they have this going on, and the children in CPS are just as much a target as a poor little black boy who is at the top of the list for facing this type of abuse. Mm-hmm. So when people say this is not happening, they're not allowed to hit kids who are in foster care, that is a lie. That's just a straight up lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's I'm just, I think we need to be talking about these things more. I think that these issues need to come out. And because 85% of children coming out of foster care are going into human trafficking, that is not acceptable.
That is not acceptable. And you know what's sad, Amelia, too, is that a lot of people say, oh, this is in the Bible Belt mainly. That's not true. It's all over the country. And the thing about what's happening in our country right now, we're really going through it. Worldwide, this pandemic. And here we have these children. Well, fortunately, they're getting a break. They're home. They're not around these people who abuse them. And hopefully they're not facing this type of treatment at home. But there are two scriptures in the Bible, in both the Old and the New Testament. In Psalm 82, verse 3-4, it says, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And in Matthew 18, it says, if anyone causes one of these little ones to sin, they're better off having a large millstone tied around their neck and being thrown into the ocean. God is so against child abuse that he says that you are better off committing suicide before you hurt a child. And yet it is the hardest thing. It has been the hardest thing to draw attention to this issue and receive anything other than, well, as long as they don't hurt my child. And you know what? When children are conceived, dad and mom don't even know that the child was conceived. I mean, that's a gift from God. All of the children belong to all of the adults. And if we were to treat children in a way that blesses them, then obviously we're blessing the future. I don't know about this pandemic, how or what about it. I believe that it's manipulated. It's hard for me to believe that this is not manipulated under the corruption that we're under worldwide. But, you know, it's like, it's almost like, well, why would God bless in the way in which we are handling his children here? They're being trafficked, they're being beaten, they're being murdered, they're being sent all over to places where they'll never, ever be found. I've noticed that even when I was traveling in Hawaii, I'm not really sure what this game was, but you would see young kids behaving as if there's somebody is after them. I think there's either a movie or a book called The Hunger Games. Uh-huh. And what I observed, even while I was living there or visiting there, were mostly black boys who looked petrified. And there was this one boy, and they looked like they're being hunted, literally. And there was this one boy who he looked like he was maybe 15, crying. You could tell he had been abused. And I was saying, can I help you? What's wrong? He said, no. He was like trying to sue me.
You're cutting out. Can you move your voice to the speaker more?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but overall, what I was seeing out there is that there are children who are just in trouble. They may be runaways. Even out here in Nevada, I see girls who are obviously being trafficked out here, and you can't do anything. If they are with a man, that you could tell this girl is scared of this guy. What do I do? But there's so much corruption in our police force, in our schools, and our children are in such big trouble. It's sort of like, you know what? We are reaping what we are sowing. We're either abusing children or we are completely turning our backs on them and acting like, well, that's not my child. That's somebody else's child. Well, guess what? When your child goes to a concert and a person decides to get up there and start shooting, well, maybe if we would have protected our children, that person would not have gotten a gun to spray bullets across this crowd. That person that was in Las Vegas who did that shootout, his dad was on the top 10 list, the top 10 FBI list. Mm-hmm. What kind of learning skills did his dad have? What did he go through? Mm-hmm. We know that when children are abused, they are going to become a so-called menace to society. So why do we turn our backs on them? And then when they're being abused, we don't do anything. And then when they commit a crime, we're like, hang him, put him in jail, give him the electric chair. Why don't we come together, especially in America? It's supposed to be the flagship nation of the world. And these are the things happening right here in our country. And we want to be quiet about it. Enough people know in this country that our children are being abused to bring it to an end. And we have a federal bill. The federal bill that we have, that New York Representative Carolyn McCarthy crafted for this purpose, we don't even need that. The bill, the legislation is already built within our U.S. Constitution to have this go away, as well as in the Universal Declaration of Independence. So we have all of these laws to protect our children, but we're being quiet about it. And there's no blessing that's going to come out of that. Our children are not going to do well. Our future, our children who we have all safe and sound, are going to run into some child that was abused who cannot find a job. And, you know, if you don't care about this child who's being abused in his classroom by his teacher, then at least care about your own child, that one day he may cross paths with that child, where if that child were taken care of and protected, the chances of him hurting your son or your daughter are going to start to disappear. And so there's